The stage lights burned hot against his skin, but 5-year-old Michael barely noticed. His tiny feet moved across the wooden floor of another smoke-filled nightclub, his voice carrying melodies that shouldn't have belonged to someone so young. While other children slept safely in their beds, he performed until midnight, then 1 in the morning, then 2. His father watched from the shadows, counting money and planning the next show. There were no bedtime stories for Michael, no lazy Saturday mornings, no childhood friends waiting at a playground. There was only the music, the applause, and the crushing weight of being extraordinary when all he wanted was to be normal. His brothers stood beside him on stage, but even they couldn't understand the particular burden he carried. He was the special one, the gifted one, the one who could never fail because too many people depended on his success. At home, mistakes meant consequences that left marks deeper than bruises. So he learned to be perfect, to smile when his body ached, to sing when his throat burned raw. The world saw a prodigy, a miracle child who moved like magic and sang like an angel. But behind those wide, innocent eyes lived a boy who was slowly disappearing, replaced by something the world demanded he become. He would steal moments alone in bathrooms, staring at his reflection, wondering who that person really was. The mirror never answered. It only showed him what everyone else saw, a product, a performer, a machine wrapped in human skin. And even then, even in those early years, a small voice whispered in his heart that this was just the beginning. The world had tasted what he could give, and it would never stop being hungry. They called him the king of pop, and Michael wore the crown with a smile that hid a breaking heart. Thriller had made him the biggest star on planet Earth, but fame at that level wasn't glory, it was a prison with walls made of camera flashes and screaming voices. He couldn't walk down a street, couldn't buy groceries, couldn't sit in a park and watch the sunset like normal people did. Every breath he took was documented, analyzed, sold to the highest bidder. So he built Neverland Ranch, his own private world where maybe, just maybe, he could find the childhood that had been stolen from him. He filled it with amusement park rides, exotic animals, and thousands of toys. He invited children to visit because they saw him differently than adults did. They saw a friend, not a commodity. The world looked at his sanctuary and whispered darkly, unable to comprehend that someone might build a fantasy land not from sickness but from desperate, aching loneliness. His skin was changing, vitiligo stealing his pigmentation in patches that he tried to cover with makeup. The tabloids screamed that he was erasing his blackness, that he hated himself, that he wanted to be white. Nobody asked about the disease. Nobody cared about the truth. They just wanted the story that sold papers. His face changed too, surgeries that he said were just a few but clearly became more. He was chasing something in the mirror, trying to fix what his father's voice had broken years ago when he called him ugly, told him his nose was too wide, made him feel defective. Michael had conquered the entire world, but he couldn't conquer the cruel voice inside his head. At night, in his massive empty mansion, he'd walk the halls alone, a king in a castle that felt more like a tomb than a home. The allegations came like lightning striking the same place twice, accusations that would have destroyed anyone else immediately. Michael Jackson, the man who sang about healing the world, was accused of the unthinkable. The first time, in 1993, the media convicted him before any trial could happen. His face was on every newspaper, every television screen, painted as a monster. The investigation consumed him, ate away at his spirit like acid. He maintained his innocence, but the damage was already done. He settled the civil case, and the world took that as an admission of guilt, never understanding the complex legal reasons or the emotional exhaustion that drove the decision. The pain nearly killed him, literally. His dependence on prescription medications grew, the pills offering temporary escape from anxiety that clawed at him constantly. Then, in 2003, it happened again. Another accusation, another media circus, another trial that lasted months and turned his life into a public execution. Every day he walked into that courthouse dressed in his finest clothes, trying to maintain dignity while the world watched him fall apart. The jury saw through the lies and acquitted him on all charges, but vindication doesn't heal wounds that deep. He was innocent in the eyes of the law, but guilty forever in the court of public opinion. His career was shattered, his finances destroyed by legal fees and betrayals from people he trusted. The music industry that had built empires on his talent now treated him like radioactive waste. But here's what the world didn't want to acknowledge: maybe he really was innocent. Maybe he really was just a broken man trying to recapture lost innocence through childlike wonder. Maybe the cruelty of false accusations was the final nail in a coffin the world had been building for decades. By 2009, Michael Jackson was a ghost haunting his own legend. The money was gone, spent on legal battles, bad business deals, and the cost of maintaining a life built on quicksand. Neverland was foreclosed, his possessions auctioned off like remnants of a forgotten civilization. He was 50 years old but looked far older, his body worn down by decades of performance, stress, and pharmaceutical band-aids covering wounds that needed real healing. Then came the announcement that shocked everyone: 50 concerts at London's O2 Arena, a comeback tour called This Is It. The world saw opportunity, Michael saw a prison sentence. His body was breaking down, insomnia torturing him night after night until sleep became a distant memory. He hired Dr. Conrad Murray, a physician who promised him rest, who had access to propofol, a powerful anesthetic that could knock him unconscious and give him what pills no longer could: complete shutdown. It was dangerous, reckless, the kind of sleep that required hospital monitoring. But Michael was desperate, and desperation makes people take risks that rational minds would reject. In those final weeks, people around him saw the signs: the weight loss, the exhaustion, the fear in his eyes when he talked about the concerts. He told some friends he didn't think he'd survive the tour. They thought he was being dramatic, typical Michael being anxious. They didn't understand he was saying goodbye. He rehearsed anyway because that's what he'd done his entire life: perform even when everything inside him screamed to stop. The footage from those final rehearsals shows him still moving with grace, still hitting notes that most singers could never reach, still being Michael Jackson even as Michael Jackson was dying inside. June 25, 2009. The phone call went out around 2:30 in the afternoon. Michael Jackson was rushed to Ucla Medical Center. By 5:26 p.m., he was pronounced dead. The cause would later be determined as acute propofol intoxication, administered by Dr. Murray in a bedroom that became a death chamber. The world stopped. News anchors cried on television. Radio stations played his music on endless loops. People who'd called him a freak, who'd mocked him and torn him down, suddenly remembered only the magic. Millions gathered in the streets, holding candlelight vigils, weeping for a man many had helped destroy. The irony was devastating. His memorial service was watched by billions, a global outpouring of grief for someone who died partially from the weight of global attention. His children spoke, his daughter Paris crying that Daddy was the best father you could ever imagine, words that contradicted every ugly thing the media had said for years. In death, Michael became human again. The world suddenly wanted to remember his humanitarian work, his donations to dozens of charities, his genuine love for helping others. They wanted to forget how they treated him, how they consumed him until there was nothing left. But the truth remained: Michael Jackson died because the world loved him too much and too little at the same time. They loved his talent but destroyed his humanity. They demanded everything he had and then condemned him for having nothing left to give. His heart had loved too deeply, loved music, loved children, loved humanity itself, in a world that took everything and gave back only judgment. The music plays on, eternal and untouchable. But the man who made it is gone, killed by fame, by cruelty, by a society that creates gods and then feeds on their destruction. That's the real tragedy, not just that Michael Jackson died, but how he died, and why.